Now we're ready to prepare this prosthesis for the skinning process. We like to use the Comfort Products multi-size stockinette, which is a nylon tubular knit, and it's a little bit heavier than hosiery, but a little finer than conventional nylon stockinette. It also happens to be very elastic, so you can stretch it over this project. If you notice, this is the skin itself that the foam is made when it was sitting in the finished mold. But in this area, it's a little bit rougher because it's been grinded to give it that finished shape. The idea is to fill all these pinholes or pockets in so that the whole project is nice and smooth. And we find that this multi-size stocking is very good for that. It's heavy enough where it'll, so to speak, hide all the sins, and fine enough where it'll give you a good finish after you paint the skin up. And we blow this down a little bit. Thank you. And now we'll pull that stocking over it nice and tight, and the stocking will be glued to the prosthesis up at the proximal edge of the socket and also around the foot.
I know we turned it inside out to keep it.
Oh, you do? Cool. That's a good idea. And Dean also turns the stocking inside out so the seam of the nylon stockinette doesn't show. Also, this is a way to use up some more tape. Yeah. Now, we usually use 2 layers of multi-size. And the 2 layers will hide anything that you have underneath just about. If you have any real deep imperfections that show through at this point, you can also use some latex caulking and squeegee it over those low areas, and then take a paper towel, wet it, and use that to feather in the latex caulking. After you get your latex filling project done, then you go at it with the multi-size stocking. If you have any real bad areas that look like they're not going to heal themselves or repair themselves through this process here. Now, what you want to do is make a very thin mixture of contact cement. You don't want to use it the way we standardly use it in the cup. You want to thin it out so it actually paints right through the 2 layers of stockinette and into the prosthetic foot and the socket. Now, the reason why we glue it down to the socket also is because this skin is going to be trimmed right up to the edge of the socket. And if you just painted the skin directly over it, it won't adhere to the socket very well. So by using the contact cement first, it'll give you a pretty good bond around the edge of the socket. Some people have problems keeping the skins held onto the socket because if they use, for example, if they use sleeves or things like that where they're pulling the sleeve over the socket all the time, it may peel away from the socket. But you can very easily repair that using a cyanoacrylate adhesive. For example, Loctite makes a product called 414, which is a cyanoacrylate adhesive designed for thermoplastics. And all you do is put a little drop of that and squeeze it together, and then it won't come off. In fact, on some of our more active patients, we automatically bond the edge of the skin to the socket with cyanoacrylate before we deliver the prosthesis. Now, if you notice, Dean has also painted the contact cement over the heel. The reason for that is because when we trim off this excess stockinette to expose the toes, we want to make sure that it's very durable over the heel so that when the patient continually dons the prosthesis into a shoe, in and out of a shoe, you're not rubbing the back of that delicate heel. So by having the heel reinforced with the stockinette, it makes the whole project much more durable and it won't peel away from the prosthetic foot. Now we're going to let this wait for about 15-20 minutes for the glue to dry, and we'll be ready to spray the Duraderm skin on it. Very nice. Well, you take a sharp blade, a scalpel, or a brand new single edge razor blade, or anything that's very sharp and accurate, and cut so we can see it around the heel, up over the instep, and remove the excess stockinette. The reason for this is there's so many pretty looking feet on the market, you don't want to cover them with stockinette before you do the skin. So we figured out this is a good place to terminate the hosiery, and then we'll paint the Duraderm skin directly over the prosthetic foot and the nylon. Now, if you want to hide the transition between that stockinette and the prosthetic foot, you can do your multi-size stocking in 2 stages. You know, glue down the first stage, and then the second stage glue up over the first about a 1/4 inch in front, which will help to hide that transition. You can also fill that edge with a little bit of latex caulking as well. But for our purpose, we're just going to paint right over it. Now at this point, to make sure that this doesn't leave, we're going to take and put a little bit of cyanoacrylate right on the edge of that stockinette and work it in. That will definitely bond the edge of the stockinette to the prosthetic foot, and there's no way it'll leave. Because what will happen is, if you don't do that and the contact cement isn't completely dry, when you go to paint the Duraderm skin on, the stockinette can loosen up. The contact cement can be softened by the Duraderm skin. And by putting that little bead of cyanoacrylate adhesive on it, you'll prevent that stockinette from moving at all. Very nice, Doctor. This is Duraderm, a prosthetic skinning system that we found. This puts a real durable, very cosmetic, skin-like finish on a prosthesis. You can paint this over endo or exoskeletal systems. If you do it over an open cell foam, for example, this Endofoam that we use, you can use the stockinette as a smoothing out process, or as a laminate, so that the skin will have more durability. If you're going over a closed cell foam, for example, those expandable pea-like covers, or any kind of closed cell foam like polyethylene foam, or an exoskeletal system, do not use the multi-size stocking or any kind of stockinette, because when you spray the skin on, it'll create a lot of air pockets and bubbles underneath the skin. This is a really nice product. You can do about 5 BK prostheses off 1 gallon. The material comes clear. You can add whatever pigments you like to it, so you can color match it any way you like. This can be brushed on, it can be dipped, and it also can be sprayed. The way we prefer doing it is with a spray gun and a pressure pot. We should show this system here. This is a pressure pot, okay? The idea of a pressure pot is to fill the paint container with pressure, so that you're actually pushing the paint through the gun. That's why you don't have a cup at the end of the gun. Siphon feed guns will not work with this material, because what you want to do is paint it when it's very thick or viscous. This way, with 1 coat, you can apply a lot of material. The more thinner you add to it, the weaker the skin becomes, and the more laborious and time-consuming the process becomes. So we have right now, we're thinning this about 1/5 thinner to 4/5 material. And the way we do it here is we have gallons of different colored material, like this is a little bit darker, and this is a little bit lighter, you can see. So the way we do it is, we pick the can for the color that we're going to use for that particular patient, put the entire can inside the pressure pot, and then paint away. This system never has to be cleaned. We leave it with paint in the system at all times. As long as no air gets to the system, it'll stay in that configuration indefinitely. So we never have to worry about cleaning. Now, if you were doing a Negroid patient yesterday, and you're doing a Caucasian patient today, the amount of material that's in those lines, don't even waste it. Use it as a base coat when you first start painting your next prosthesis. So Dean has this all ready to paint, and as you can see, it's got the multi-size stocking on there, all glued down. The first thing you want to do is blow everything off. Make sure you have no dust particles on the project at all. If you have any dust, it'll turn into a pimple when you paint the skin on. So make sure you blow it off first. And now, what Dean is going to do is he's going to apply the first coat. The first coat is applied very heavy. You want to apply it so heavy that it fills all the pinholes from the stockinette. And you make a smooth skin texture out of the whole thing. So what he's doing is laying it on gradually. If you notice the spray gun is set in a horizontal pattern so that you can spray vertically and your pattern is horizontal. That helps you to lay an even, smooth coat of material on it. Now, if you notice, he's laying it on very heavy. It'll look thick and it'll look like it's almost ready to run, but that's fine. Once it dries, it'll shrink down. As long as with your first coat you can seal all the pinholes in the project, the second coat will be done very dry so that you give it more of a skin tone texture. Notice you have to go underneath the foot to get underneath the prosthetic, to hit the instep of the prosthetic foot. You always have to make sure that your gun is hitting all those areas. Okay, let it run. Now, we're going to let this dry for about a half hour, and when this first coat dries, you inspect it to make sure that all the pinholes are completely covered and filled. It's going to look like a vinyl dipped life jacket. Very smooth and very slick. So what you want to do is take away that smooth texture by adding a dry coat for your second and final coat. And we're going to apply the dry coat now. And that's done by backing off on the spray gun. If you notice, Dean is about 18 inches from the project, so that the material is kind of drying in the air as it passes onto the prosthesis, and that's what's giving this dry or orange peel type of texture. And that'll help the skin to look more realistic and take the shine away. And that's it. You want to take the gun away so they can see? Now we're going to let this dry about 10 minutes and then finish the proximal edge of the socket by cutting away all the excess and buffing off the prosthesis, which will complete it. After the second coat is dry, you will let that dry for 15-20 minutes, and at this point you want to take a very sharp razor or a scalpel and carefully trim away the excess stockinette from the project. And if you use very sharp blades, it makes it very easy. You just right along the socket and trim away the excess. And then we'll take this into the machine room and buff off that edge. There's a certain technique to be used when buffing so that you reinforce it and kind of melt the stockinette into the thermoplastic socket. So you'll see that momentarily. Now, you want to buff off the edge of that excess using this technique with the wheel spinning that direction. Whoops! This way, as the wheel is spinning, actually now that wheel is spinning counterclockwise, and actually melting the edge of that stockinette into the thermoplastic socket itself. So by using this technique, it will not peel away, and it will give you a very clean finish. And then we just take on a flexible shaft tool, makes it easier for us, and put a Sandaflex wheel on it just to cut away those burrs and finish the prosthetic edge, the socket edge. And we're finished. Let's show it. Just hold it still there. I'll get this in closer. You can bring it closer to the camera. Alright, now you can get an idea of what it's going to look like finished. Nice clean edges, and the skin is very well bonded to the edges of the prosthetic socket. Also at this point, like we discussed before, you can just coat the edge, the top edge, with a little dab of cyanoacrylate adhesive and then wipe that clean, and that will really hold the edge of the prosthetic skin to the socket, and that'll prevent it from delaminating through use.